So this form here is different than, of course, this form here. This form here I made through the two forms that I did individual press molds, put them together, then I textured the seam, and I had a closed form. So what I did for this one was just cut into it like it was a, similar to your lantern. So I cut into it with a beveled edge cut. So then the lid sits right on top. And I did put a little guide here, you can see. So you could put that lid right back, right where that little guide tells you. So this one already kind of had the lid decided for me, and I just had to cut it. But in the other forms, whether or not you decided to do the tripod foot one, or even no tripod foot, whichever situation, you don't have this luxury of having this lid already there. So there's lots of different ways to make a lid, but one of the things that I really liked with a lid, and one thing that is imperative in this project, is that the lid itself it's not just a slab that sits on top. It has to have some sort of locking mechanism within it so it doesn't just fly off. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. One way is very much like how this one is. So this one, I built a flange on the interior edge of this. So you can see that with this. And then this lid has this mechanism. And so this circle here fits this circle here. The edge of this fits the edge of that. And so it sits in place. So by building a flange, you could have a locking lid. So I could, realistically, score and slip and add a flange in here. If I don't want to do that, another way of making a lid is I will take a coil of clay, and I'm going to make it so it's going to fit in pretty tight. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the coil in, and then I'm going to do kind of a bevel edge cut through two ends of it. You'll see. So basically I'm just making it so the coil fits that interior really well. Now it's not adhered or anything. I'm going to pull this out, and I'm going to use, look at it, soft slab right now. Just going to use a little bit of water, and I'm going to connect these two edges. So what I like to do is I like to kind of pinch this so it has a little bit of more of a slab looking wall. I mean, I could use a small thin slab for this if I wanted to, but this is just as easy. And I just want to make sure that this is again going to fit back in here. So the goal for this one is that this lid will have a slab here, and then it's going to sit down into the form. So this little ring is going to sit in there, and therefore it's going to lock the lid in place. So it's just kind of like making this one, but not making a flange on the interior. So there's multiple ways that you could make lids. I'm going to draw these really quick if I can get this to go on the blackboard. And all right. So you could have a form. Let's say that's my form. And that's a cross section of it. There. So I could have a lid that drops down, and then it could overhang. All right, so that's a locking mechanism in there. So that's a cross section of a lid. It's like I cut it in half. I could also have one that's like this. So that's building a flange into the form. And I could either do this style of lid, or I could do a flat lid, right like that. And it sits in here to here, and there's a knob there. That's another type. I could do one where, again, very similar to the one that I showed. This has a connection here. This is the tightest fitting lid, this style, but it's not always necessary. So you have multiple ways that you can do this. Oops. All right. Let's put that back. All right, so let's say I want to do just a basic one. The lid has the flange that sits inside. I want to make sure this sits in. So I might have to just do a little bit of pinching just to make sure this goes all the way in. And you could make it a little bit smaller if you would like as well. All right, so that's definitely going to fit nicely in. So I could just use a slab. And I like to use these little dishes like this. So I'm going to put the slab in here and allow it to have a nice little curve. I'm going to texture the other side. So say I like this. I'm going to try and repeat the same texture. All right. I could refine cut this too later on. This doesn't have to be exact right now. So the idea is that this little slab here will be connected to this coil. This coil will be attached here eventually. And this will then lower down and have a nice locking mechanism. But the thing I don't always like about this is that the slab's just really flat. So I like to have a little dome or a little arch to it. So I might put it in one of these little dishes here, remembering that the texture is on the back. So it has a nice kind of curve that's going to fit the form nicely. I don't necessarily just want it to sit flat. And I'll let this set up for a little bit of time. And I could even just put this here and let that set up. If I wanted to do the interior coil, I would take scoring tool. I'm going to score the ledge of here, particularly trying to do the lower interior edge. And I could take the coil, roll this out, and attach it making sure it's nicely attached. Now, right now, it looks horrible. Looks horrible. I'm going to refine cut this, but what I need to make sure is I need to make sure that that coil is dropped down from the rim, because my goal is that the lid sits on this. The lid doesn't sit on this. The lid sits on this. It sits on the flange, just like a picture like this. This wasn't here. It's gonna sit like this. So I need to make sure, I'm gonna use this wooden rib tool, that this is smooth and refined, and it's lower than the lip of the piece. And then I will take my fettling knife, clean this up just so it's a nicer circle. All right, so I still have a lot of refining to do on this, but you can see that that is dropped lower. So it's meant that I'm going to cut a small slab that's going to fit right in here, and that lid's just going to sit right on top. So this is quite smaller than this one will be. This one's going to be a little bit different. So this is just two simple styles that you could use. So if I chose to do this one, I'm probably going to wait for this to set up a little bit more, and I'm going to do more refining. But once I'm ready to kind of work the lid, all I need to do is make sure that I put a little piece of plastic between these pieces. So I'm going to put a little piece of plastic here. I'm going to take my slab. I should probably texture it now. This one now I'm going to do a lot of refining, trimming right side up. So this is going to be a little tricky for a little bit. I'm going to need to kind of get an estimate of what size this little circle is. So I'm going to rough out what size I think this is. All right, so it's a little big on that one side. So now I'm going to need to go back, and I'm going to need to do a little bit of trimming. All right, so my goal again is that it's sitting inside. I'm going to do a little bit more trimming. Again, once I get the size good, I'm going to let it set up, and I'm going to do some refining afterwards. Okay, but again, that goal is that that lid is sitting down in the form. It's not sitting on top of it. So that's just a different style of lid. Again, I could take this off, let this set up, and then attach a little knob onto this if I wanted to. Knobs are really important, but knobs you can make in any way. This one thing I just encourage people is that it has a slight undercut, so your fingers have something to grip onto. It's not just straight, or it doesn't go from thicker to thinner like this, like just a tube, because that's also a little tricky to pick up. There's a reason for how they're shaped. So this one just makes it easy to lift off and on.